The most difficult journey of my life. Subtitle, or the dramatic show of Mezza Puneta, half a jerk. Not recommended for the faint of stomach. Many people know that I could win huge sums of money by betting that if there is only one small child on a flight who cries his heart out from takeoff to landing, without even stopping to breathe every now and then, that child will be kept in his mother's arms, no more than a meter away from me, within the radius of the 4 cardinal axes. I don't know the reason, but it has happened to me too many times to think that it is just a matter of chance. It is for this reason that almost always traveling in economy class and being among the first to board the plane, ready to take off, I watch with a certain anxiety the passengers who pass in single file in front of me, resigned in the face of yet another small crucifixion. It was, therefore, with a certain surprise and initial relief, a few days ago returning from Moscow on a packed flight, that I saw sitting next to me an elderly Italian and his companion carer or carer companion, as I would later try to find out, without success. With just one glance I christened my neighbor with the nickname of Mezza Puneta, and even after days I tell myself that I was not so much mistaken. Anagraphically speaking, he was about 60 years old, but for everything else he seemed to be my grandfather, even though we were both bald. She could have been 5 to 6 years younger than him, but quite badly worn, although she had a truly uncommon smile, and I think she was traveling more towards sainthood than towards Malpensa, given how things turned out later. I was coming from Krasnoyarsk and returning home. It took me just a couple of seconds to discover the biggest of the tragic problems of my traveling companion. As soon as he breathed, sitting elbow to elbow next to me, I was hit by a cloud of napalm, a breath that could have knocked down even a horse or a cow in full health. A first big shiver of cold sweat ran down my back, and I tried to position myself with my nose almost pressed against the window, but such protection immediately proved to be completely insufficient. Heavy and smelly odors enveloped me from my legs to my head, emphasized by the fact that Mezza Puneta spoke continuously without interruptions, especially breathing directly in the face of the poor girl who sat next to his right arm and who continued to smile at him. I don't know exactly, as I was saying, whether because she was totally anesthetized or because she was destined to be a martyr and a saint. She had very oriental physical features, and I understood almost immediately that she was a Siberian from the far east of Russia, because she spoke many times in very fluent Russian with the flight attendants, almost always to obtain drinks or special foods for her hero. This guy was dressed in jeans with a bright red crew-neck sweater and an enormous steel watch on his left wrist. He showed off a marked fake Roman accent. In fact, he seemed a bit fake to me in every one of his representations on actions, intent, however, on being the protagonist. He also carried a pouch with a very long strap held by his neck that, once seated, went down well below his pelvis, almost to the floor of the aircraft, since he was short, and gave him the right, perhaps he thought so, to keep his legs very wide apart, well beyond the limit of his rented space for that trip. He immediately took a tablet out of his pouch and, arranging it as best he could between his lunch table and that of the carer, started a film halfway between an American comedy and the semi-porn genre. At that point, real porn film would have been more interesting. My neighbor was very didactic, and especially in the more daring scenes. He explained in great detail to his companion, "Yes, because here the director wants us to understand." I stood up a little to do a quick scan of the entire aircraft, trying to spot a way out, perhaps in the last seat and almost hanging from the plane's wheels. But the feat was impossible since there was a single, very compact group of Chinese occupying 9/10 of the vehicle to leave the other free space for a dozen Russians and Italians. I didn't lose heart completely because I have experienced many dramatic moments in my life, but I understood that that evening-night ordeal would be among the most difficult of my existence. I made my peace with it also because I immediately understood that I couldn't complain to the cabin manager because I don't think the paragraph that concerned me is even in the list of possible reasons for which a passenger can demand to change seats. However, I immediately began to push hard with my right knee to demand that my space as provided for in the ticket purchase be respected. For the right elbow and forearm, however, I had fewer problems because my hero needed to accompany with broad gestures of his hands and arms every explanation of everything that was happening in the movie and on the plane. At a certain point, almost instantly, I saw him fall with his head on the woman's shoulder, and I thought of a small miracle. Sleeping with his mouth closed, the volume of deadly air gas that he was expelling did not reach bearable limits, but at least it decreased compared to the default conditions. Unfortunately, the illusion lasted only a few seconds, and Mezza Pugnetta, more lively than before, began his show again. It should be noted that it was not the breath of an alcoholic or a heavy smoker that I can still tolerate, but of something unknown to me that aroused even worse suspicions in my mind. A cirrhotic in the last hours of life, and already such a corpse that somehow someone was remote controlling with some means unknown to me? I really don't know, but the evidence of that titanic problem was recorded even by his martyr wife, who handed him a giant open can full of supermint chewing gum. He took one and started chewing it with determination, but things didn't change at all. Meanwhile, over the loudspeakers, first in Russian and then in English, when we were already halfway down the runway, the commander informed us that due to heavy air traffic, we would be stuck there for about an hour, a flight of 4.5 hours instead of 3.5. I admit that my steel will gave way, and I even thought about suicide, but I immediately understood that it would have been technically impossible. Mezza Pugnetta, on the other hand, didn't care at all, because first he stuck 2 fingers in his mouth, and I was horrified thinking he wanted to remove his dentures, and took out the chewing gum well soaked and dripping with his saliva, gum that he immediately and without hiding took care to stick on the inside surface of the plastic sheet, with the safety instructions in the pocket in front of each passenger. Then, enjoying that unexpected delay, he decided to take care of his own boogers and began a well-done and patient job, meticulous to the extreme. He then threw each meatball prey towards the floor, pushing it with the spring obtained using his thumb and forefinger. This went on for a long time, and in the meantime, before my eyes, the frames of the possible steps of his entire terrifying potential repertoire were already passing until the arrival, assuming that my heart could take it. Every now and then he would throw me friendly glances to fraternize, but meeting my look of hatred and disgust that could not be more explicit, he would turn away, where instead he was greeted by the usual reassuring, toothy smile that dismissed his subsequent pranks. The dinner chapter was as I had imagined, full of twists and turns from a horror thriller movie. In total, Mezza Pugnetta drank 6 glasses of wine, and I don't know how many orange juices, Coca-Cola, and tea at the invitation of the saintly nanny, who in the meantime made friends with the flight attendants to get everything and more. He was omnivorous and would swallow without even looking at what it was. Then he put in the pocket in front of him, on the seat back of the passenger in the row in front of us, various sticks of a kind of quince jelly that they had served with dinner, chocolate, various chocolates, slices of bread, biscuits, and I don't know what else. For me, there were splashes of sauce on my pants, dirty forks that our man repeatedly dropped on my shoes, and of course different liquids that overflowed from his glasses and fell from them due to his shaking hands. His woman, who had probably been genetically modified, continued to smile at him, and you could also clearly see a flame of love-admiration coming out of her eyes, while she, perhaps without even knowing it, performed one of the greatest cinematic quotes of all time, the push of the best meatballs of her meal towards him, like in the Disney masterpiece Lady and the Tramp. I will leave out the last 30-40 noteworthy episodes so as not to test your stomach, and I will conclude with the arrival, by now I could no longer believe it, in Milan. As the wheels of the Airbus 300 peeled a very thin layer of asphalt on the runway, another traveler behind us sneezed violently twice in a row, and Mezza Pugnetta, with a reaction that took place in 1/100th of a second, raised both hands to the sky and exclaimed loudly, "What class! Bravissimo! P.S. If you want, add some credits."